just made a list of the worst episodes in Rick and Morty, and trust me when I say this, they are terrible, horrible to watch, with the final one in this video rated and said to be the worst episode in the whole entire Rick and Morty show. So without further ado, let's begin, starting with the Rickdependence Spray, where Morty creates what might be the most disturbing thing in Rick and Morty history. So before the family heads off to see some new Marvel movie, Morty begs Beth to hurry up at the hospital so they don't miss it. Morty runs into an opportunity when he spots the equipment. Okay, this is super weird and just too gross for me, because Morty decides to use the mount for his own purposes. 1 week later, Morty has been relaxing in hope, thinking back on his deed.
Morty, you dirty little doggy.
Until he notices a familiar barrel Rick brought back with him. Rick reveals he borrowed a barrel of horse semen from the hospital to create a bioweapon against underground cannibalistic horse people called Chuds. Panicking about his secret, Morty frantically convinces Rick not to test the semen, but of course Rick being Rick proceeds with the experiment anyway. But a power surge caused the barrel to explode, mutating the sperm into floating toothy monsters that eats humans. Rick blames himself for bringing a bad sample, much to Morty's guilt and relief. The family gets airlifted to the Pentagon, where Professor Shabubu theorizes the sperm will head to the Grand Canyon because of its vaginal shape. Yep, I know this episode's humor is just not it. When he brings in a captured sperm monster to analyze, Morty shoots it to cover his tracks.
Oh, why? It had a gun!
Are you out of your mind bringing an armed sperm in here?
They can't hold guns!
The boy literally never lied.
They're sent to the Grand Canyon with nukes, but the rapidly evolving sperm shoot down their plane with a trebuchet, because of course they have medieval weapons now. Rick, Morty, and 2 Marines survive, though one dies immediately. Morty saves a sperm he names Sticky that recognizes him as its creator. Summer suggests creating a giant egg to attract the sperm, but Shabubu steals her idea.
Get MIT on the phone and get this guy a Nobel Prize.
You became a woman today.
The Marine Blazin, who they thought was cool, stabs himself and reveals he's wearing a thong, shattering their image of him before the sperm devour him. The Sperm Queen reveals Morty's responsibility to Rick.
Morty, you nasty, lying little world-ending pervert. I'm sorry. What was it like? Fantastic.
But Sticky helps them escape. The sperm head to Las Vegas, where Summer's egg is placed on the Luxor. When Morty confesses the truth, everyone realizes this will create a giant incest baby, a biological child of Morty and Summer. The president orders the egg jettisoned, but it takes 30 minutes.
No need to panic, everyone. I have a simple solution. See you all in hell!
I don't see how that's going to help.
Rick gets captured by Chuds, whose king wants revenge for Rick impregnating his daughter. The Chuds fight the sperms, but Sticky fertilizes the egg anyway. With no choice, they launch it into space, creating the giant incest baby that appears in the post-credit scene. So why was this episode hated? This episode perfectly captures why fans were frustrated with Rick and Morty's direction. As one commented about the episode, this one was out there for the sake of being out there. The giant sperm was stupid. The underground horse people though felt like someone threw a couple of darts at a concept board and nudged them together. You see, the episode prioritizes shock value over storytelling, throwing together random elements that don't even serve the narrative. It's gross out humor without purpose make us the viewers uncomfortable, not because it's clever, but because it's trying too hard to be edgy. Next up is That's Amorte, where the Smith family's weekly spaghetti dinner turns into an ethical nightmare. The family's been enjoying these delicious Thursday night spaghetti meals that Rick supposedly makes for them. Everything seems normal until Morty discovers the horrifying truth. The spaghetti comes from dead people on another planet whose organs turn into pasta when they commit suicide. Morty's understandably horrified by this revelation and decides to confess his guilt at the funeral of Lawrence, the guy they just eaten. He also tells his family about it, but instead of being disgusted by the cannibalism, they're mainly bummed about losing their weekly spaghetti nights. Really, Smith family? That's your priority here? The president of Spaghetti Planet reaches out to Morty after hearing about his confession and offers him ethically sourced spaghetti from people who consented to assisted suicide. And Morty somehow convinces himself this is better, and the family goes back to their spaghetti dinners. But of course, it gets worse. Rick reveals that the planet has turned this into a massive industry, selling Mortio's spaghetti across the freaking galaxy. The government is now actively encouraging depression in their population to keep production up. When Morty confronts the president about this, he's told they can stop because it would crash their entire economy. Morty reluctantly asks Rick for help, promising to do whatever Rick wants for 2 weeks. Rick tries creating sentient clones programmed to kill himself, but they fight back and refuse to become food. He attempts making less sentient beings, but that doesn't work either. They finally settle on creating minimal life forms, just torsos with one arm to kill himself with. Production starts back up, but immediately faces opposition from 2 groups. Alien consumers complaining the new spaghetti tastes off, and planet inhabitants fighting for torso rights. Both groups end up detonating bombs and creating the fact. Complete chaos breaks out as the other aliens show up trying to force the locals to kill themselves. Rick offers one solution: find the last person willing to commit suicide and clone their spaghetti genetically. That person is Fred Bunks, who has 2 months left to live, but has been putting off because he morally opposes the spaghetti trade. Rick convinces Fred that his death will end the industry for good. Fred goes through with the assisted suicide while his entire life story broadcasts to the planet. All his failures and successes, love and loss, good and bad moments. When Fred dies and turns into spaghetti, both Morty and consumers across the galaxy are so repulsed by experiencing his full, complex life that they swear off human spaghetti forever. Rick gives his nihilistic speech about how living beings consume each other and ethics don't matter, but even he loses his appetite after tasting Fred's spaghetti and experiencing the weight of his life. The family switches to Salisbury steak, which Rick admits comes from another questionable source, but they choose to say ignore it because it tastes good. You see, this episode demonstrated another major problem with the show. As one commented, most of the other ones listed were so stupid that I enjoyed it for the intentional dumbness. Spaghetti One tried too hard to be dumb funny for me. Fellow user kept it simple, just saying it was really bad. The episode tries to tackle serious themes about consumption ethics and moral responsibility, but gets lost in its own gross out premise. You see, it wants to be both intentionally stupid and philosophically deep, but ends up being neither. The result feels pretentious rather than insightful, missing the balance that made earlier seasons work so well, and this just makes the episode so pointless, making it 4th place on our list. Continuing this list next is how Poopy got his poop back. The season 7 opener that somehow made Mr. Poopy Butthole even more insufferable than before. The episode kicks off with the family complaining about their unwanted house guest, who's been crashing at their place. A drug dealer shows up looking for money that Mr. Poopy Butthole promised, and Beth finally loses it and demands Rick to deal with the problem. Mr. Poopy Butthole, who's completely wasted, explains to viewers how his life spiraled downhill after Beth shot him. He lost his job, his wife and his son left him. Basically, he's become everything annoying about that one friend who never knows when to leave the party. But instead of addressing this with any real depth, the episode just lets him ramble on about his problems. Rick initially plans to use a robot ghost to scare him away, but after talking with the family, he decides to call up his old friends to help. He brings together Gearhead, Squanchy, Bird Person, and his neighbor Gene for what's supposed to be a solution but turns into a pointless bar crawl. The whole thing feels like an excuse to bring back fan favorite characters without giving anything meaningful. The episode walk through their hangout sessions without any real plot or character development. Gene accidentally leaves his lawnmower running before joining the group, which becomes a post-credits gag where police try to stop it. The sheriff gets killed, and the other officers decide not to tell his family. It's a random violence as humor. Like, dude, this ain't what the Rick and Morty jokes used to be. What makes this episode particularly frustrating is how it handles Mr. Poopy Butthole's character, who was originally a clever one-off joke that parodied how viewers form attachments to characters. But here, he's just an annoying, self-pitying drunk who won't leave the family alone. The episode expects us to care about his personal problems, while simultaneously making him as unlikable as possible. With one noted, I kinda didn't like season 7 episode 1 either. Poopy's voice wasn't good, plot was subpar, and there was no B-plot either, with another comment being even more direct. I haven't seen all of season 7, but episode 1 was easily the worst I've seen, with some saying Mr. Poopy Butthole has such an annoying voice. The episode takes a character that worked as a brief gag and stretches him into a full episode without understanding why he was funny in the first place. It's padding disguised as nostalgia with no real story to tell. Now for our second place worst episode in this list is Gotron Jerrysis Rickvangelion, which takes what should have been a full Voltron parody, but somehow makes it incredibly boring to watch. The episode starts with Rick canceling a trip to Blue World because he spots a blue Gotron ferret on a nearby moon, one of 5 animatronic Voltron vehicles that Rick becomes obsessed with collecting. While Morty desperately wants to go to Boot World, Summer sides with Rick and they abandon Morty to collect the ferret. After collecting all 5 ferrets off screen, which already shows how little the writers cared about the actual adventure, Rick convinces the family to pilot them in a combined Gotron to fight interdimensional monsters. The family easily wins, but instead of this being satisfying, it just triggers Rick's obsessions to get more ferrets for other Ricks. What follows is an incredibly dull business subplot where Rick hosts barbecues with other Ricks. They form deal to share ferrets, and Summer somehow becomes a corporate climber while Morty gets treated like a grunt worker. The episode tries to be a commentary on corporate greed and family dynamics, but it's so painfully slow and unfocused that you'll find yourself checking how much time is left. There's a subplot about the original anime style pilots trying to get their ferrets back, which should add excitement, but instead feels like another boring layer to an already convoluted plot. Rick gets drunk, Summer fires her parents, Rick fires Summer, and it all leads to a climax where Summer's giant baby from a previous episode shows up to save the day. The worst part is how the episode handles its themes. It wants to say something about the family's unity and Rick's destructive obsessions, but it's buried under so much corporate intrigue and mecha action that none of it lands emotionally. The pacing drags, the jokes fall flat, and even the usually reliable Rick and Morty banter feels forced. The fans' reaction speaks volume about how badly this episode missed the mark. I was most disappointed in the Voltron one. It did not go where I would have wanted it. Another says I disliked that even more than the sperm one, to be honest. The only time I felt bored watching Rick and Morty. Now for our final one, and arguably the worst episode in Rick and Morty history, is Rise of the Numbericons. An episode so fundamentally broken that it makes you question if the writers even understood what made Rick and Morty work in the first place. The episode is essentially a full-length sequel to a throwaway post-credit scene from Get Shrifty, following Ice-T, now Water-T, as he battles number-based aliens called Numbericons, who are attacking his own planet of Alphabet Trium. The plot involves Water-T recruiting his old math teacher, Mr. Goldenfold, to help decipher something called the Eye of Harmony, which leads to a convoluted space adventure involving prophecies, ancient relics, and the revelation that numbers and letters originated from the same planet. What makes this episode particularly painful is how it completely abandons the core Rick and Morty formula. That's right, Rick doesn't even appear at all, and Morty is reduced to a passive observer, dragged along because he's in detention. Instead, we're forced to watch Mr. Goldenfold, a minor side character, have relationship drama with Water-T over homework assignments and Grammy speech snubs. The episode tries to create this epic space opera narrative, but it's built around characters we don't care about solving problems that feel completely disconnected from the show's universe. The pacing is absolutely horrible. The episode throws endless exposition at you about Numbericons' politics, ancient prophecies, and the complicated backstory between Water-T and Mr. Goldenfold. There's a romance subplot between Water-T and the villain Sinistar 7, betrayals involving characters named like Oxygen S and 8, and a final battle where Water-T transforms into Magma-T and defeats the main villain by shooting him in the dick. It's like watching a completely different show that happens to have Morty in it. The worst part is how the episode takes itself completely seriously. Rick and Morty works best when it balances humor with genuine emotion, but this episode is just a straight-faced sci-fi adventure with barely any jokes, not mentioning not having Rick either. The few attempts at humor fall completely flat, and the emotional beats between Goldenfold and Water-T feel forced and unearned. The fan reaction to this episode was universally negative, with many considering it the absolute worst episode in the series. One Reddit user perfectly captured the viewing experience. Numbericons. I actively had a headache watching it. Another fan says they don't even remember it. I think my brain classified it as a trauma and repressed the memories. The episode was so bad that multiple viewers couldn't even finish it. The episode represents everything wrong with Rick and Morty, but it loses focus on what makes it special. It's a boring, overlong space adventure that forgot to include the characters we actually care about, the humor that defines the show, and any reasons for existing beyond filling a runtime slot. It's not just bad television, it's actively painful to watch. And there you go, those are the top 5 worst episodes in Rick and Morty history. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to comment down below on what you think is the worst episode. Click here to watch our latest Rick and Morty video. Until then, I'll catch you guys next time on the next Rick and Morty video.